Bullies try to force the shy student to do their homework. Big mistake. She was a martial arts prodigy. Maya Thornfield sat in the back corner of Jefferson High School's chemistry lab, her oversized hoodie pulled tight around her small frame. At 17, she barely reached 5 feet 2 inches, with wire-rimmed glasses that constantly slipped down her nose and dark hair that she kept deliberately messy to avoid drawing attention. Most students at Jefferson barely noticed her existence, which was exactly how Maya preferred it. She had been at this school for 3 years now, ever since her family moved to the suburbs from downtown, but she remained as invisible as the day she first walked through these halls. The late afternoon, sun streamed through the classroom windows as Maya carefully packed her textbooks into her worn backpack. Chemistry was her last class of the day, and she always stayed a few extra minutes to avoid the crowded hallways. She had learned early in her high school career that blending into the background was the safest strategy. Her grades were excellent, consistently ranking in the top 5% of her class, but she never raised her hand unless directly called upon. Teachers appreciated her quiet diligence, but her classmates saw her as nothing more than another bookish nobody. Just get through today, Maya thought to herself as she finally gathered the courage to leave the empty classroom. 2 more years, and I'm out of here. The hallways of Jefferson High buzzed with typical teenage energy. Students clustered around lockers, sharing gossip and making weekend plans. Maya walked quickly, keeping her eyes focused straight ahead, navigating through the maze of bodies with practiced precision. She had mapped out the least crowded routes to her locker months ago, timing her movements to avoid the popular kids and their inevitable drama. Well, look what we have here. Maya's blood ran cold at the sound of that voice. She didn't need to turn around to know who it belonged to. Brad Hutchinson, Jefferson High's star quarterback and unofficial king of the junior class, had somehow noticed her today, standing 6 feet tall with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confident swagger that came from never being told no. Brad was everything Maya tried to avoid. His letterman jacket stretched across broad shoulders that had carried the school football team to 3 consecutive championships. Maya Thornfield, right? Brad stepped directly into her path, flanked by his usual crew. To his left stood Derek Morrison, a linebacker whose neck was roughly the same circumference as Maya's waist. Derek's buzz cut and perpetual scowl made him look older than his 17 years. On Brad's right was Tyler Kim, smaller than his friends, but compensated with a cruel intelligence that showed in his calculating eyes. Tyler was the type who remembered every embarrassing moment and weaponized them at the perfect time. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. "Don't engage, just walk away." "Excuse me," she mumbled, trying to step around the trio. "Hold up there, genius." Brad's hand shot out, not quite touching her but blocking her escape route. "We need to have a little chat." The hallway seemed to pulse with anticipation. Other students slowed their pace, sensing potential drama. Maya felt their eyes on her, waiting to see what would happen to the quiet girl who never caused trouble. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she forced herself to look up at Brad's face. "I don't know what you want, but I need to get to my locker," Maya said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Derek snorted with laughter. "Listen to her, all polite and shit. Think you're better than us, bookworm." "Nobody thinks they're better than us," Tyler added with a smirk, "but some people need reminders about how things work around here." Maya's hands tightened around her backpack straps. She could feel the familiar weight of her textbooks, the same books that had earned her a reputation as the class brain. In middle school, being smart had been enough to earn respect from teachers and avoid most social drama. High school operated by different rules, rules that Maya had never quite figured out. "Look, I don't want any trouble," Maya said, taking a small step backward. "Trouble?" Brad laughed, the sound echoing off the metal lockers. "Who said anything about trouble? We just need a little favor from our resident math genius." The pieces clicked together in Maya's mind with horrible clarity. She had heard whispers about Brad's grades, how Coach Patterson had been putting pressure on the athletic department to maintain academic standards. Several star players had been benched earlier in the season for poor performance in their classes. "You want me to do your homework?" Maya stated flatly. "See? I told you she was smart," Tyler said, his grin widening. "We've got this calculus test coming up and, well, let's just say numbers aren't exactly our strong suit. But they're definitely yours," Derek added, cracking his knuckles in what Maya assumed was meant to be intimidating. Maya felt a familiar surge of anger, the same feeling she got when she watched injustice play out around her, but felt powerless to stop it. These 3 had everything handed to them, Popularity, athletic prowess, the admiration of their peers, and now they wanted to steal her hard work too. Don't do it, a voice in her head warned. Walk away, find a teacher, tell someone. But Maya knew how these situations played out. Teachers couldn't monitor every interaction, and reporting bullying often made things worse. She had seen it happen to other students who tried to fight back through official channels. The system protected the popular kids, the athletes who brought glory to the school. A quiet nobody like Maya would be forgotten as soon as the next crisis emerged. I can't do that, Maya said quietly. It's cheating. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brad's friendly facade cracked, revealing something harder underneath. Can't or won't. His voice carried a new edge that made Maya's skin crawl. Both, Maya replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Derek stepped closer, using his considerable size to loom over her. Maybe you didn't hear us right, bookworm. This isn't really a request. Maya's mind raced through her options. The main office was 3 hallways away, too far to run. Her locker was behind the trio, effectively cutting off that retreat. Other students continued to watch, but none showed any intention of intervening. She was on her own, just like always. Think of it as a loan, Maya told herself desperately. Just this once, and maybe they'll leave you alone. But she knew it wouldn't end there. Bullies didn't stop after getting what they wanted once. They came back for more again and again, until their victims had nothing left to give. No, Maya said louder this time. Find someone else. Brad's face flushed red. He wasn't used to being told no, especially not by someone he considered beneath his notice. You're making a mistake, Thornfield. The only mistake would be helping you cheat, Maya shot back. Tyler laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. She's got spirit, I'll give her that. Too bad spirit doesn't count for much when you're eating lunch alone every day. Speaking of lunch, Derek said, his eyes lighting up with malicious inspiration, maybe our friend Maya needs to learn some table manners. The next day arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Maya wish she could skip school entirely. She had barely slept, replaying yesterday's confrontation over and over in her mind. Part of her regretted not just agreeing to help with the homework. It would have been easier, and she had the skills to complete calculus assignments in her sleep. But a larger part of her felt proud that she had stood up for herself, even in such a small way. Maya had spent most of her life avoiding conflict, bending over backward to stay invisible and safe. Yesterday had been different. Yesterday she had found her voice. The feeling lasted exactly until lunchtime. Jefferson High's cafeteria was a carefully orchestrated social ecosystem. The popular kids claimed the central tables, their conversations loud enough to dominate the entire space. Athletes sat together in their letter jackets, sharing protein bars and discussing game strategies. Academic achievers clustered near the windows, textbooks open beside their lunch trays, and scattered throughout were the various other cliques and loners who made up the school's social fabric. Maya typically sat alone at a small table near the emergency exit, a position that allowed her to eat quickly and disappear if necessary. She had perfected the art of eating lunch in under 10 minutes, finishing her meal before anyone noticed her presence. Today felt different from the moment she entered the cafeteria. Conversations seemed louder, laughter more pointed. Maya told herself she was being paranoid, that her confrontation with Brad yesterday hadn't been significant enough to change anything. She grabbed her usual turkey sandwich and apple from the lunch line and made her way to her corner table. She had managed exactly 3 bites when Brad appeared beside her table, flanked by Derek and Tyler as usual. Today, they had brought reinforcements. 2 more football players Maya recognized but couldn't name, both large enough to block her view of the rest of the cafeteria. Maya, there's our favorite tutor, Brad announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. We've been looking for you. Ignore them, Maya thought desperately. Maybe they'll get bored and leave. We had some time to think about your answer. Yesterday, Tyler continued, sliding uninvited into the seat across from her, and we decided to make you a better offer. Maya kept her eyes fixed on her sandwich, trying to disappear into herself. Around them she could feel other students, turning to watch. The cafeteria's normal chatter began to fade as more people noticed the confrontation developing. See, we figured out why you said no, Derek said, his voice carrying false sympathy. You're worried about getting in trouble, right? Like, what if a teacher finds out? Brad nodded as if this made perfect sense. So we came up with a solution. You do our homework and we make sure nobody bothers you anymore. Protection, you know, like a business arrangement. Maya finally looked up, meeting Brad's eyes with as much courage as she could muster. I already gave you my answer. Did you? Tyler asked, his tone deceptively casual. Because I don't think you really understood the situation. Without warning, Derek reached across the table and knocked Maya's apple off her tray. It rolled across the floor, coming to rest under a nearby table. The action was subtle enough that teachers monitoring the cafeteria might miss it, but obvious enough that surrounding students began to pay closer attention. "Oops," Derek said with fake concern. "Clumsy me." Maya's face burned with embarrassment, but she forced herself to remain seated. "Don't give them what they want, don't react." "You know what?" Brad said, as if struck by sudden inspiration. "I bet Maya's just shy about asking for help. Maybe she needs us to show her how friendly we can be." Before Maya could process what was happening, Tyler grabbed her lunch tray and tilted it toward her. Turkey sandwich, chips, and chocolate milk cascaded across her lap, soaking through her jeans and creating a sticky mess that drew gasps from nearby tables. The cafeteria fell silent for a moment, the kind of absolute quiet that only happened when everyone was watching the same disaster unfold. Maya sat frozen, milk dripping from her hoodie onto the floor, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on her humiliation. "Oh man, that's so embarrassing," Brad said with exaggerated sympathy. "Good thing we're here to help clean you up." Derek grabbed a handful of napkins from a nearby dispenser and began roughly wiping at Maya's hoodie, the gesture ostensibly helpful but clearly designed to add to her humiliation. Other students began pulling out their phones, the modern reflex to document embarrassing moments for social media. Maya felt something break inside her chest, not her spirit exactly, but the careful control she had maintained over her emotions. 3 years of invisibility, of carefully avoiding exactly this kind of attention, and now she was the center of a spectacle that would follow her for the rest of high school. "Fight back," a voice whispered in her mind. "You know how. You've always known how." But Maya pushed that voice down just as she had been doing for years. Violence solved nothing. Her grandfather had taught her that along with everything else. Control meant choosing when to act, not reacting from anger or embarrassment. "I need to clean up," Maya said quietly, standing on shaky legs. "Sure thing," Brad replied with false magnanimity. "But hey, think about our offer, okay? We're just trying to help each other out here." Maya walked to the bathroom with as much dignity as she could manage, milk still dripping from her clothes and laughter following in her wake. She locked herself in a stall and finally allowed the tears to come, hot and angry and full of frustration at her own helplessness. 2 more years, she reminded herself. Just 2 more years, and then college, where none of this will matter. But deep down, Maya knew that running away wouldn't solve anything. Bullies existed everywhere, in every school and workplace and community. The only difference was whether their victims chose to fight back or spent their lives as targets. The harassment escalated over the following weeks with the methodical precision of a military campaign. Brad and his crew had apparently decided that Maya's continued refusal to do their homework constituted a personal insult that required systematic retaliation. It started small. Maya would find her locker jammed with gum, requiring a maintenance request to get it open. Her textbooks would disappear from her desk during class changes, only to reappear in random locations around the school. Someone began leaving notes in her locker, juvenile insults written in block letters. "Nerd," "freak," "no friends for a reason." Maya endured each incident with practiced silence, cleaning up the messes and replacing damaged property without complaint. She told herself that ignoring the behavior would eventually make it stop, that bullies lost interest when they didn't get dramatic reactions. She was wrong. The Bullies campaign intensified during Maya's most vulnerable moments. In the gym locker room, someone would hide her clothes while she showered, forcing her to ask Coach Williams for help locating them. During presentations in English class, Brad would make faces and rude gestures from the back of the room, breaking Maya's concentration and causing her to stumble over her words. The worst part wasn't the individual incidents, but the way they isolated her from potential allies. Other students began avoiding Maya, not out of cruelty, but from the simple desire to avoid becoming targets themselves. Teachers who might have intervened seemed oblivious to the subtle harassment, focused on more obvious problems like fighting or vandalism. Maya's grades began to suffer for the first time in her academic career. She found herself spending lunch periods hiding in the library, bathroom stalls, or empty classrooms, anywhere that offered temporary refuge from Brad's attention. Her carefully planned routes through the school became elaborate mazes designed to avoid potential confrontations. This has to stop, Maya thought as she sat in her last period study hall, staring at a chemistry assignment she couldn't focus on completing. But how? Reporting the harassment felt futile. Maya had observed other students attempt to get help from the administration, only to face increased retaliation and accusations of being tattletales. The popular kids had perfected the art of harassment that left no evidence, behavior that looked like harmless teasing to adult observers. Fighting back physically seemed equally pointless. Maya was small, outnumbered, and school zero-tolerance policies meant that defending herself would likely result in suspension alongside her attackers. The system was designed to protect the institution, not individual students. Maybe I should just do their homework, Maya found herself thinking. It's not worth all this trouble. But even as the thought crossed her mind, Maya knew she couldn't surrender her principles that easily. Giving in to Brad's demands would only prove that harassment worked, encouraging him to escalate his behavior and target other vulnerable students. She might find temporary peace, but at the cost of her self-respect and the safety of future victims. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon in late October. Maya had stayed after school to make up a chemistry lab she had missed due to a mysterious food poisoning incident that she strongly suspected involved tampered cafeteria food. The hallways were nearly empty, most students having fled to after-school activities or part-time jobs. Maya was walking toward the main exit, her backpack heavy with books and lab equipment, when she heard footsteps echoing behind her. She didn't need to turn around to recognize the swagger in those steps, but she looked anyway. Brad was alone for once, his usual entourage apparently busy elsewhere. This should have made Maya feel safer, but something in his expression suggested the opposite. His friendly mask had slipped entirely, revealing the calculating predator underneath. "Maya," he called out, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. "Perfect timing. I was hoping we could have a private conversation." Maya quickened her pace, but Brad's longer legs allowed him to catch up easily. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path to the exit just as he had done weeks earlier. "You've been avoiding me," Brad said with mock hurt. "That's not very friendly." "I have nothing to say to you," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I have plenty to say to you." Brad's expression hardened. "See, I've been patient, really patient. Most people would have gotten the message by now, but you just keep being stubborn." Maya tried to step around him, but Brad mirrored her movement, staying in her way. The hallway suddenly felt much longer than it had moments before, the exit impossibly far away. "My patience is running out," Brad continued. "Coach is breathing down my neck about grades, and I need those assignments completed by tomorrow morning. So here's what's going to happen." He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through what Maya realized with horror were photos and videos from the cafeteria incident weeks earlier. Her face, covered in milk and sandwich debris, looked even more humiliating on the small screen. "Social media is forever, Maya. One post on Instagram, and everyone at Jefferson High gets to relive your little lunch accident. Maybe I'll add some creative captions. Local nerd can't handle simple eating, or why Maya Thornfield will never have friends." Maya felt her hands beginning to shake. The photos were bad enough, but she knew Brad's followers would amplify any humiliation exponentially. Her carefully maintained invisibility would be shattered permanently. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Try me." Brad's finger hovered over the share button. "Unless, of course, you'd like to discuss those calculus assignments again." This is it, Maya realized. Either I give in now, or this gets so much worse. For 3 years, she had chosen the path of least resistance, believing that invisibility was the same as safety. She had watched other students suffer similar harassment and told herself it wasn't her responsibility to intervene. She had convinced herself that avoiding conflict was a form of wisdom. But looking at Brad's smug expression, Maya finally understood what her grandfather had been trying to teach her all those years ago during those long hours in his dojo. Strength without compassion is tyranny, he had said. But compassion without strength is helplessness. Our true warrior knows when each is needed. Maya had spent so long focusing on the first part of that lesson that she had forgotten the second part entirely. There were times when compassion meant refusing to enable bullies, even if resistance carried personal costs. "No," Maya said quietly. Brad blinked, apparently not expecting such a simple response. "No? No, I won't do your homework. No, I won't let you blackmail me. And no, I'm not afraid of your stupid photos anymore." Something shifted in Brad's posture, his casual confidence replaced by something uglier. "You have no idea who you're messing with, bookworm." "Actually," Maya said, feeling years of suppressed anger finally rising to the surface, "I think you're the one who doesn't understand." Brad lunged forward, apparently intending to grab Maya's backpack or push her against the lockers. It was exactly the kind of impulsive, aggressive move that had probably worked for him countless times before. Maya's body reacted before her conscious mind could interfere, muscle memory taking over from 15 years of training that she had tried so hard to forget. She stepped slightly to the side, letting Brad's momentum carry him past her, then swept his legs with a precise motion that sent him crashing to the floor. The sound of his body hitting the tile echoed through the empty hallway like a gunshot. Brad lay on the ground for a moment, more shocked than hurt, staring up at Maya with complete bewilderment. What the hell? Maya stood over him, her body balanced and ready, feeling more centered than she had in months. "My grandfather owned a martial arts school," she said calmly. "I've been training since I could walk." Brad scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment and rage. "You think you're tough now? Wait until Derek and Tyler hear about this." "I'm done waiting," Maya replied, "and I'm done being afraid of you." The next morning, Maya arrived at Jefferson High feeling like she was walking into a completely different school. Word of her confrontation with Brad had apparently spread overnight, probably through the same social networks that he had threatened to use against her. Students stared at her with new curiosity as she walked through the hallways, but it felt different from the usual scrutiny. Instead of looking through her like she was invisible, they were actually seeing her for the first time. Maya made her way to her locker, half expecting to find it vandalized again, but it was untouched. She gathered her books for first period and headed toward her chemistry class, trying to ignore the whispers that followed in her wake. "Did you hear what happened to Brad Hutchinson yesterday?" "Maya Thornfield? No way, she's like the quietest person in school. I heard she's some kind of black belt or something. Brad's telling everyone it was just lucky that she caught him off guard." Maya slipped into her chemistry class and took her usual seat in the back corner, but today felt different. Instead of trying to disappear, she found herself sitting straighter, making eye contact with other students who glanced her way. The real test came at lunchtime. Maya entered the cafeteria with her usual turkey sandwich and apple, but instead of rushing to her corner table, she walked slowly through the space. Conversations didn't die the way they had during Brad's harassment campaign, but she could feel the shift in attention. Brad was sitting at his usual central table, surrounded by Derek, Tyler, and several other football players. Maya could see him gesturing animatedly, probably explaining yesterday's incident to anyone who would listen. His body language suggested he was trying to downplay what had happened, but the defensive way he kept glancing around the cafeteria told a different story. Maya chose a table closer to the center of the room than she had ever sat before, not quite bold enough to approach the popular kids' territory, but no longer hiding in the far corners. She unpacked her lunch methodically, aware that dozens of eyes were tracking her movements. She had taken exactly 2 bites of her sandwich when Derek Morrison appeared beside her table. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Maya looked up at him calmly, chewing her food before responding. "About what?" "About what you did to Brad yesterday. That was a cheap shot, and you know it." Other students at nearby tables began paying closer attention, sensing another confrontation brewing. Maya could see phones being discreetly positioned to record whatever happened next. "Brad tried to grab me," Maya said matter-of-factly. "I defended myself." "Defended yourself?" Derek's voice rose slightly. "You attacked him for no reason." Maya set down her sandwich and looked directly at Derek, her voice carrying to the surrounding tables. "He cornered me in an empty hallway and threatened to humiliate me on social media unless I did his homework for him." "What would you call that?" A murmur rippled through the nearby students. Maya had never spoken this loudly in the cafeteria before, and her calm recitation of facts carried more weight than any emotional outburst would have. Derek's face reddened. "You're lying. Brad would never..." "Would never what?" Maya interrupted. "Would never harass someone smaller than him? Would never use his popularity to intimidate people into doing his work? Would never knock food off someone's tray to humiliate them in front of the whole school?" The cafeteria had grown quieter, students straining to hear this unprecedented public confrontation. Maya realized she had reached another crossroads, another moment where she could choose to back down or continue standing up for herself. Compassion without strength is helplessness. "I have photos too," Maya continued, pulling out her phone. "Screenshots of the homework assignments Brad wanted me to complete, text messages from Tyler explaining exactly what would happen if I didn't cooperate. Should I share those on Instagram?" Derek stared at her, apparently not expecting this level of preparation. "Shaus, you saved that stuff." "I save everything," Maya replied. "I document every incident, every threat, every attempt at harassment. It's called evidence." Tyler appeared at Derek's shoulder, his face pale. "Derek, Maybe we should. Just what? Maya asked, standing up from her table. Should just leave me alone? Should just find someone else to intimidate? Should just do your own homework like everyone else has to? The cafeteria had fallen almost completely silent now. Hundreds of students listening to Maya Thornfield, quiet, invisible Maya, deliver the most public confrontation Jefferson High had witnessed in years. See, here's what I think happened, Maya continued, her voice carrying clearly through the space. You three decided that I looked like an easy target. Quiet girl, sits alone, doesn't have friends to back her up. Perfect victim, right? Derek opened his mouth to protest, but Maya kept talking. But you made one mistake. You assumed that being quiet meant being weak. You thought that avoiding confrontation meant I couldn't handle one when it became necessary. Maya's voice grew stronger with each word. You picked the wrong person to mess with. Brad finally approached, flanked by two more football players, his face set in angry lines. That's enough, Thornfield. Maya turned to face him, and everyone in the cafeteria could see the change in her posture. Gone was the hunched, defensive stance she had carried for 3 years. Instead, she stood balanced and ready, her grandfather's training evident in every line of her body. Is it? Maya asked calmly. Because I think we're just getting started. Brad stepped closer, trying to use his size advantage to intimidate her. You got lucky yesterday. That won't happen again. Lucky? Maya laughed, the sound carrying a confidence that surprised everyone present, including herself. Brad, I've been holding back for 3 years. Yesterday wasn't luck, it was restraint. The circle of students around them had grown larger, phones recording from every angle. Maya realized that this moment would define the rest of her high school experience and possibly the rest of her life. She could back down now, apologize, return to her corner table, and spend the next 2 years in reinforced invisibility, or she could finally stop hiding who she really was. You want to know the truth? Maya said, her voice carrying to every corner of the cafeteria. My grandfather didn't just own a martial arts school. He was a grand master in 3 different disciplines. I've been training since I was 3 years old. I have competed in national tournaments. I have black belts in disciplines most people can't even pronounce. Brad's confident expression began to waver slightly. But more importantly, Maya continued, he taught me that real strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting them, including protecting them from bullies who think popularity gives them the right to terrorize whoever they want. Derek made a move toward Maya, apparently thinking he could grab her before she could react. It was exactly the kind of mistake that came from underestimating an opponent based on appearances. Maya's response was swift and precise. She caught Derek's reaching arm, used his own momentum to spin him around, and applied just enough pressure to a nerve cluster to make him yelp in pain and drop to one knee. This is called a compliance hold, Maya explained to the stunned cafeteria. It doesn't cause permanent damage, but it makes it very difficult to continue being aggressive. She released Derek, who scrambled away from her, rubbing his arm and staring at her with newfound respect and fear. Tyler, apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, began slowly backing away from the confrontation. Look, Maya, maybe we can all just what? Maya asked, turning her attention to him. Just pretend this never happened? Just go back to you 3, making my life miserable, while everyone else pretends not to notice. She looked around the silent cafeteria, making eye contact with dozens of students who had watched her harassment for weeks without intervening. That's the problem with bullying, Maya said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. It only works when good people decide it's not their problem, when everyone just looks away and hopes someone else will handle it. A few students in the crowd began to look uncomfortable, recognizing themselves in Maya's description. But it is everyone's problem, Maya continued, because bullies don't stop with one victim. They move on to the next person and the next, until someone finally stands up to them. Brad, apparently realizing that his reputation was crumbling in real time, made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. You think you're some kind of hero now? You're still just a nobody, Thornfield. One day I won't be alone, and then we'll see how tough you really are. Maya smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it was a completely genuine expression of confidence and inner peace. Brad, she said softly, I'm never going to be afraid of you again. And more importantly, neither is anyone else. She looked around the cafeteria one more time, making eye contact with students who had been watching the confrontation unfold. If you see someone being bullied, you have a choice. You can look away and hope it doesn't happen to you next, or you can stand up and be part of the solution. Your choice. Maya packed up her lunch, shouldered her backpack, and walked toward the cafeteria exit. The crowd parted silently to let her pass, and she could feel hundreds of eyes following her progress. As she reached the doorway, she heard something that made her stop and turn back. Applause. It started with one person clapping slowly, then another, then dozens of students joining in. Not everyone. Brad and his inner circle stood in sullen silence, but enough to make the message clear. Maya Thornfield was no longer invisible. The weeks following the cafeteria confrontation brought changes to Jefferson High that rippled far beyond Maya's personal situation. Word of her public stand against Brad's harassment had spread not just through the school, but into the broader community, shared through social media and parent networks. Maya found herself in the unusual position of being something she had never been before: popular. Students who had never acknowledged her existence began greeting her in the hallways. Teachers who had viewed her as just another quiet student started paying attention to her insights during class discussions. The attention felt overwhelming at first. Maya had spent so many years being invisible that suddenly being seen felt like standing under a spotlight. But gradually, she began to appreciate aspects of her new social status that she hadn't expected. Other students began approaching her with their own stories of harassment and intimidation. Some wanted advice on how to stand up to their own tormentors. Others simply wanted someone to listen who understood what it felt like to be targeted. Maya realized that her public confrontation had given permission for other victims to speak up, to stop suffering in silence the way she had for so many years. The ripple effects extended far beyond her original conflict with Brad. Brad himself had become a cautionary tale almost overnight. His social media threats, preserved in Maya's careful documentation, had found their way to school administrators and eventually to his parents. The football team's zero-tolerance policy regarding academic dishonesty meant that his athletic scholarship prospects were suddenly in jeopardy. More importantly, other students no longer feared him the way they once had. His aura of untouchable popularity had been shattered by a quiet girl who refused to be intimidated. The Emperor had no clothes and everyone could see it. Derek and Tyler had faded into the background, their association with Brad's downfall making them social liabilities rather than assets. Maya occasionally saw them in the hallways, but they made eye contact with her only long enough to nod politely before looking away. The most significant change, however, was in Maya herself. 3 years of hiding had left her uncertain about who she was when she wasn't trying to be invisible. Rediscovering her voice and her strength felt like remembering a language she had once spoken fluently but had allowed to rust from disuse. Maya began participating more actively in her classes, raising her hand to answer questions and contribute to discussions. Her grades, which had suffered during the worst of the harassment, rebounded to their previous excellence. She joined the school's debate team, finding that her experience defending herself had given her confidence in other forms of intellectual combat. Her research skills and ability to remain calm under pressure made her a formidable opponent in structured arguments. Most surprisingly, Maya discovered that she genuinely enjoyed being around other people. Years of isolation had convinced her that she was naturally antisocial, but she began to realize that she had simply been protecting herself from potential pain. She formed friendships slowly and carefully, testing the waters of social connection with people who shared her interests and values. Study groups became social gatherings. Academic partnerships evolved into genuine companionship. One afternoon in late November, Maya was walking through the hallway between classes when she noticed a commotion near the freshman lockers. A group of older students had surrounded a small, obviously intimidated younger boy, and Maya recognized the dynamic immediately. "This is it," she thought. "This is the choice I was talking about." Maya approached the group, her footsteps confident and purposeful. The older students recognized her immediately. Her reputation had made her one of the most famous people at Jefferson High. "Is there a problem here?" Maya asked calmly. The apparent leader of the group, a junior Maya didn't recognize, tried to maintain his aggressive posture. "Nothing that concerns you, Thornfield." Maya looked at the freshman, who was clutching his backpack like a shield and trying to make him